Welcome to another video in our node by node challenge where we're going through every single node in the Blender shading workspace for Blender 4.3. We've gone through all the inputs and outputs and the colors, and we are on the last of the converter nodes in the shading workspace. So we're on one that is called Wavelength. Now this is not one that is used very often. This is a little bit more scientific. So if you're a scientific person and you have a project you want to work on to get an exact color based on a wavelength of light, you can use this because this goes all the way down from 380 nanometers all the way up to 780. So what that means is this corresponds to a very specific color on the wavelength of light. Okay, so if you've ever seen a rainbow, for example, rainbow is going to have different wavelengths of light that go across the whole thing. So when you look at it, okay, so black would be basically the beginning or no light. Once you start getting up a little bit higher, you start getting into these like magentas and then blues. And then you go from blue to like a teal to green to yellow to orange to red, back to black. Okay, so think of it as like a rainbow. Okay, so you're going to go from one side to the other of the rainbow with all the different colors along the way. Now, the use for this is if you have a very specific color that you need to output to a specific wavelength, and you're very scientific and you want it to be exact, you can use this and put in whatever nanometers you want. So it's just a different way to calculate color. Now, how can this be useful? Well, there's a couple ways you can use it, and you can kind of play around with it. But basically, some of the things that you can do is you can plug in a map range node into here. You can do a texture coordinate and separate X, Y, Z, and you can start to pull the values out of here for each of the different colors. And you can even make some of it disappear if you plug it into the alpha. Okay, you want to basically just have it be certain colors. Instead of using the Y, you can use X. It's going to change the direction of it, as you notice. Instead of it being left to right, it'll be top to bottom. If you use Z, it's just going to give you the overall color, the individual color from the first one, which is red. Okay, but we'll just leave it as that. Okay, now if you want to go ahead and kind of duplicate some of these, and let's say that you wanted to have similar setup, and you wanted to just use a mix node to be able to combine these, you could do that. Actually, we could do it as a color output. And then you take that into the wavelength. And you get some weird, cool designs. Because what you're doing is you're taking and you're blending from one color to the next along this whole route, which is kind of cool. So you can go ahead and you can do that. If you leave this off, actually, it'll go ahead and kind of separate it this way, so it gives you a completely different texture than what you'd have if you only used one. And you can change these numbers around depending on what you want your object to look like, how squished you want it, if you want it to be blended a little bit more or a little bit less. Same with these different colors. You can kind of move this around to control what your texture output is. So this could be useful, especially if you wanted to be able to kind of set up some sort of pattern or mask or anything on here. This would be kind of a cool way to be able to do that. It's unique. I'd love to see somebody try to do this and make it work for a texture. Hopefully somebody can figure that out. But basically, the simplest form is wavelength is just a specific color along the wavelength of light. So hopefully that helps. If you have questions, let me know. And definitely make sure you like, follow, share, and stay tuned for all my future videos. We're going to go through all the rest of the nodes. This is the last one from the converter section, and we'll be moving on to the next ones for the next videos. Thanks, and keep on watching.